Hi dear students, welcome to La Excellence Daily News Analysis. Today, let's discuss the article of 21st November 2020. Let's see the first article of the day. India's no to Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement could still be a no. So, initially, India had decided that it will participate. By 2016, India decided that because of certain objections, unless and until some clarification is given with respect to the fundamental issues raised by India, India will not be participating. So, now, when the 15 East Asian countries agreed to go up with respect to RCEP, now is the question of India. Will India agree to be part of our RCEP, or as per its earlier stand in 2016, will it stand at the same context is the question. So in this article, we'll try to address some fundamental questions. So what is the first question? So we'll try to understand what is Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Then we'll understand the objectives of establishment of this partnership agreement. Moving further, we'll understand the differences between RCEP versus TPP, that is Trans-Pacific Partnership. Then, what are the objectives or what are the progress that has happened with respect to RCEP? We'll try to understand. Moving further at the last, we'll try to understand what is the current India stand on that. So, will India again re-engage with RCEP, or will it make its stand to be very clear? So now, what is RCEP? RCEP is Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. This is called to be one of the largest free trade agreement ever. So in 2019, RCEP members would constitute around 30% of the world output and population, 28% of the world trade, and 44% of the trade is expected to be intra-RCEP. The main objective of this RCEP is to enhance or strengthen the regional value chains among these Asian countries. So initially in 2011 that they came up with this plan to establish an Asian-led regional comprehensive agreement. So through this they want to eliminate the tariffs. So they want to reduce the non-tariff barriers, whatever it is present as of day, and ensure there is a liberalization in terms of foreign trade among these particular regional countries. So in terms of goods, RCEP made a very good progress. In terms of investments, RCEP came up with respect to the 4 pillars like promotion, protection, facilitation and liberalization. So agreement in terms of goods, agreements in terms of investments, that is trade and investments, were very good. But however, agreements in terms of services were not that promising, or liberalization in terms of services had certain discriminatory restrictions or measures. So having understood the importance of RCEP and its objective of integration of global value chains across the goods and investments and less in terms of services, now we'll try to compare it with the TPP. So the first question that would come to the mind is RCEP can be a global economic partnership, or can it integrate the East Asian countries at the massive scale was the question. If Trump would not have foregone with TPP, then TPP, that is Trans-Pacific Partnership, would be the world's most extensive free trade agreement that would have been present. So, if with TPP was finalized, then in such a case, RCEP would not be called as a comprehensive economic integration. Moving further, the second question is TPP a really free trade agreement, or it's a highly discriminatory managed trade? So why is this question coming to mind? Because TPP had several regulatory issues. For example, it may be in terms of labor, it may be in terms of the environmental standards, and even the corruption matters also, because as you know, the developing countries have some regulatory issues in terms of labor, environmental standards, all these things. So with TPP there might be a chances of domination of the developed countries over the developing countries in terms of the regulatory issues like labor, environment, etc. Whereas RCEP is literally a different one compared to TPP, where TPP emphasizes more on a regulatory issue. RCEP is kind of a template that is given by World Trade Organization in terms of promoting multilateral trading systems. But here, India has certain contentious issues. So what are the contentious issues that we'll see in the later part? Next, let's try to understand what is the progress made with respect to RCEP. See, RCEP had come up with a primary objective of developing trade and investment liberalization. So when it comes to the goods, that is in terms of trade in goods, many countries like that of China Vietnam, Malaysia, all these people have reduced their tariffs. See, as you can see here, so the main objective is eliminating the tariff and reducing the non-tariff barriers. So countries like China, Vietnam, Malaysia have already taken the necessary measures to promote the goods. So for example, China has gone for a massive reduction in the tariffs. So earlier 9.4% was the tariff imposed. Now 1.2% only is the tariff that is being imposed. So to that extent, it has been successful in reduction of the tariff. So next, moving on to the services, as I've already told, with respect to services, RCEP has not made substantial progress. So that's where it is more shallow in nature with respect to the service sectors, especially with respect to movement of natural persons, that is like skilled laborers from across one country to other country is not promoted. And the third most important area is with respect to the investments. Investment rules are still not yet formulated. The work is still in progress. And the second thing, rules on dispute settlement. Again, this is also, there is no clarity. So because of which, India is still not very fine to sign this agreement, or still the conditions has not improved with respect to it. One major objection of India is with respect to the electronic commerce. We want to ensure data privacy and prevent the cross-border electronic transfer of information. So we have a certain objection that is being raised with respect to this. So, but RCEP members want India's participation in that. So that's where they've always kept the door open for India. So whenever India likes to join this, so India will be considered as the original signatory to this thing. Then can participate in the RCEP meeting as an observer. Then moving further, whenever India decides and gives in writing that they want to join, then India will be acceded to the part of the agreement. So, but now, what is the thing? Will India join RCEP, or is the situation has changed from 2016 to here? So, India again is not willing to join RCEP. The major two objections are, the first thing, it is with respect to the market access. As you know, as you are well aware, with the recent Chinese aggressions and recent border violations and all, so India is literally worried about the market access that would be provided to the countries like China, which can destabilize India by dumping its goods. And the second reason is India's economic turnaround. That is, India with COVID-19 has launched Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, where India wants to be self-reliant, self-dependent. So in such a scenario, going for FTAs can promote regional value chains rather than the domestic value chain. So now India wants to promote its domestic value chains rather than the regional value chains. So because of these two reasons, India is highly unlikely to join. Apart from this, the other major reason is still now investment rules, there is no clarity. Then, with respect to the dispute settlement mechanisms, still now there is no clarity. Because of these four major reasons, India is very unlikely to join this RCEP. Let's move to the next article, Digital Nation. So, this was a name given by a Prime Minister during recent technological summit in Bangalore. So, what Prime Minister told us? Digital has become a way of life in India. So, is it really so? When do we call a nation to be a digital nation? Let's try to understand here. So, first of all, with respect to digital accessibility, India has 750 million connections because of the smartphones, which is more affordable, and the internet availability. So because of 750 million connections, the financial technology sector has thrived very well in India. So it may be from online education, it may be from delivering of goods and services, or the telemedicines, including many of the professionals working from home during the COVID-19 situation. All this demonstrate that India has a kind of way of life which is more digital in nature. But do you really say that, just because we are using more technology or more usage of digital makes India to be a nation? No, not necessarily. So let's see what is the true measure of digital nation. The first thing is readiness of the governments to use the technology. That is, to what extent government is using technology in delivering its services. Now let's analyze, is India a truly digital nation? So firstly, in terms of government's readiness, so we can see government has established G2C centers, that is government to citizen centers, that are called as common service centers. Then many a times government is providing advices to the agriculturalists through the common service centers. Then digital payments of welfare benefits through the bank accounts. So many of the payments has been transferred through DBT, and government not only this is providing legal advice to almost 4 lakh people through the tele law scheme. So like this, government is constantly engaging the citizen through the mode of internet. But however, government has massively not expanded this to other sectors. So sectors like that of road safety, if we can integrate digital platforms, then in such a case whatever is an accident or mortality because of accidents can be reduced in an year. So with COVID-19, the current government wants to adapt more and more technology in terms of health and the education. So as you can see, India wants to achieve universal health coverage by 2022 with the objective or with the roadmap of Ayushman Bharat. Yes, through Ayushman Bharat, we want to distribute a digital health ID card for all the citizens. So with digital health ID card, so we can easily dispense the medicine services. But when they initially thought of digital health identity card, as per the planning commission estimation, it would cost around 0.1 to 0.5% of GDP. Can India afford for this much of procurement cost is the question. So, but not only about the digital identity card. When we have to see, when India has to distribute the COVID vaccines, then can we make so much of affordability is the question. So now, at the broader level, if we have to say, yes, government is engaging citizens more and more through a digital mode, but at the same time, government has to ensure that there is a fixed deadline for service delivery. If we have to really conclude that digital has become just a way of life for all of us, then in such a case all the intrinsic process of the government should be made in terms of digital, and along with that, whenever it is made digital, there should be a deadline to make it more effective is the important point what we can get from this article. Let's move on to the next article. The time use survey as an opportunity lost. Gaps in India's version data will impact Sustainable Development Goal 5.4 and ILO's resolution on defining work. So, before we move further, we'll try to understand what is this Sustainable Development Goal 5.4. See, among all the Sustainable Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goal 5.4 is considered most important. Why? It's because it helps in measuring and valuing the unpaid work by the domestic services or unpaid care given by the women and men, and reducing the unpaid work through the public services and infrastructure. So what does Sustainable Development Goal 5.4 says is, so any unpaid work that is done in the informal sector, it may be in terms of caregiving done by the woman or domestic services. So this unpaid work has to be replaced with the public services or through by establishing the infrastructure. So this is what is Sustainable Development Goal 5.4. So in order to understand in India how much proportion of the population is working on the paid worker or on the formal sector, and how much proportion of the population is working in the unpaid and informal sections or giving services but not being getting paid for any of their services. For example, mother in the house, she'll not be paid for any of the services that is delivering by the woman at the house. So such kind of unpaid has to be identified. So that's where we went for time use survey. Now, the next point is ILO's resolution on defining the work. See, in the 19th International Conference on Labour Statistics, ILO has passed a very important or a path-breaking resolution. In this resolution, they are redefining the work. So what is this resolution is called as Statistics of Work, Employment and Labour Underutilization. As per this, the definition of work is work as an activity performed by the persons of any sex or age to produce goods or provide services for use by others or own use. So any activity or any goods that is provided or any services that is provided, either it is for their own use or that is to be used for others' usage. So then it is called to be a work. So now further, they have categorized work into 5 different categories. What are the different categories? First one is employment, that is production of goods and services. Second thing is work is also considered whatever own work you are doing for own use, that is also considered as a work. Third one, unpaid work, that is the informal work that is given by our mothers. Then fourth one is volunteer work. Fifth one is other work. So other work include the compulsory work performed to pay some for certain goods and services, etc. So, why it is called path breaking? It's because for the first time, this unpaid domestic services and unpaid care is recognized as a work in the international level. So moving further, if we have to implement the Sustainable Development Goal and ILO's resolution, then it was necessary for us to go for a survey. So there are two types of surveys which we usually do. One is employment unemployment survey. The other one is time use survey. India traditionally is following this employment unemployment survey. This survey gives an information whether any individual is engaged in the economic activity or is not engaged in the economic activity. But the biggest disadvantage of the survey is it is not accounting for the nature of economic activity that is being involved. See, for example, if an individual is doing household work, if individual is giving a care work, then it is not calculated as an employment in the employment unemployment survey. Okay, so that's where the nature of work or the informal works that will not be taken into the account in case of the employment unemployment surveys. So that's why, because of this disadvantage, the 62nd round of NSSO had recommended, along with UES, we shall also go for TUS, that is time use survey. So what is the advantage of time use survey? So time use survey would tell what is the proportion of a time an individual is engaged in different activities. So how much is the unpaid activity that an individual is trying to do. So with this, we will be able to implement the ILO resolution, that is of the unpaid work or the category of work. So this TUS is also a very important source for information that is spent on caregiving activities or unpaid domestic services. It also gives us information on the time spent on learning, socializing, leisure, etc. So remember here, one important thing. So EUS gives you information whether an individual is engaged in an economic activity or not. TUS will give you the characteristics or the nature of work an individual is engaged. So with TUS, you cannot say whether an individual is working or not working, but whereas EUS say, you can definitely say whether you belong to a category of employed or unemployed, because TUS usually collects the samples for 1 or 2 days. So with that short span of sample time, we cannot say whether an individual is engaged in the economic activity. That's where, so we rely more on EUS. But with ILO's new definition of the work, so if we have to consider the unpaid sectors in the information, then TUS is very, very important. But now, what is the objection? India, for the first time on a massive scale, has compiled the data of time use survey. But the major objective or the major objections is this: India, while making this survey, has not considered the objective of ILO resolution while making the sample survey. Because in the survey, the basic questionnaire, the information with respect to the assets of households or the vehicles or the consumer durables is not quantified. So in such a scenario, TUS for implementation of the Sustainable Development Goal and also ILS resolution will not be effective. Let's move to the next article, not for fresh contempt action against the comedian. So Attorney General has given the permission to initiate the fresh contempt action against the stand-up comedian Kunal Kamra for his grossly vulnerable and obnoxious tweet. So this is the second time Venugopal has been giving this contempt case. So firstly, when Supreme Court had granted an interim bail on the Republic TV editor-in-chief Arnab Goswami case, then also Kamra's tweet was considered to be a contempt of court. Again, for the second time, when a photo was posted by him, again a contempt has been initiated against him. So here the bigger question is, in democracy, there is no chance of dissent, or is a difference of opinion as suppressed through the name of contempt of court? So can we use this draconian law, that is contempt of court, to suppress the dissent of the people, is the larger question that has to be addressed in this case. Let's move on to the next article, Digital Health Mission. So during the Technology Summit, they have told the existing Digital Health Mission, which has been launched in the 6 union territories, will be launched at the all India level. So therefore, they're saying that Ayushman Bharat will be a 100% transaction based model, which will develop that national digital health mission at the larger scale, as India's healthcare sector is massively spreading across. So in the similar way, the IT based model will also ensure safety and security, at the same time would ensure and help us in the universal health coverage. Let's move on to the next article. Exercise Malabar comes to an end. As you are all well aware, recently the exercise Malabar is in news from a long time because of intention of Australia to join this naval exercise and India's objections for it. So finally, the 24th edition of Malabar exercise has been concluded. So this has been concluded with an objective of commitment of the participating countries, that is 4 countries, India, Australia, Japan and US, towards free, open, inclusive India Pacific. As along with that, also it ensures rule-based international order in the open oceans. So along with that, there was also a 30th edition of India Thailand Coordinated Patrol, or 30th edition of Corpat was also conducted in the Andaman Sea. So remember here, one thing you have to remember is exercise Malabar, that was between India, Australia, Japan and United States. Next, 30th edition of Corpat, that is between India and Thailand, which was carried out in the Andaman Sea. And the third thing which happened is India also delivered food to the South Sudan through Mission Sagar. So these are the 3 important things you have to identify in this article. Let's move on to the next article. Australia to temporarily host HISRO satellite tracking facilities. So before we understand more about this article, so we'll try to understand what are the joint efforts of India and Australia in terms of space cooperation. So in 1987, India and Australia started signing a memorandum of understanding, which was finally concluded in 2012. Then again the relationship was upgraded through comprehensive strategic partnership in terms of practical agreements on cybersecurity, emerging technology, and critical minerals. Along with a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement, India also has set up, India and Australia together has set up Australia-India Strategic Research Fund. So this fund is said to be one of the largest bilateral science program fund, that is of around $100 million to be funded for India. So along with this joint efforts, recently that India has decided for implementing its Gaganyaan mission, that is of placing of Indian in the space by 2022, Australia will be providing the tracking facilities. It will be helpful in tracing Indians through the human space flight program. Along with this, India recently has also signed one more framework agreement, that is on cyber and cyber-enabled critical technological cooperation. So the objective of this framework agreement is to ensure open, free, safe and secure internet. So try to remember these kind of keywords, and writing these kind of keywords in the examination will give you more marks. All the best for your examination. Thank you.